everyone. Thank you for joining us in our last session on our first day of the industry conference. I think if you've been in some of the sessions, we've covered a lot of great topics on creative process today, talking about the score, talking about casting, and I really hope most of you have been able to join us. We're really excited to be presenting this year's our first masterclass of our industry conference with Stephen Frears, co-presented by Pinewood. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'd like to actually introduce Andy Weltman from Executive Vice President of Pinewood International to come up and say a few words before we start off our session.
Thanks, everyone. I'm not going to bore you with, you're not here to see me, but I do want to say a couple of quick thanks to people. First of all, our team from Pinewood's I can't see anything, but in the first two rows, we're well represented here. London, of course, Toronto, Atlanta, Ireland, New York, we're all here. We have the Film Fund people, everything. So if you want to come and talk to us afterwards, we'd love to talk to you. But really what I'm here for is just to say thank you to a couple of people, specifically our friends at TIFF for inviting us back once again to sponsor the Masterclass series. I think we've done 3 or 4 this now, 4. This is our 4th, and hope many more to come, but it just keeps getting better and better. And the ultimate is being able to introduce Mr. Stephen Frears, who has had a huge impact on my career, and I'm sure on everyone's here. Pinewood, we also want to thank our friends and actually my former colleagues at the British Film Commission and Film London for helping make this day possible. But Pinewood is known for, I think our heritage is hosting and partnering with some of the iconic franchises around, like Bond and Star Wars and DC Comics and Marvel. But really, in the last couple of years, we've started up with several film funds in London, in Wales, in the Isle of Man. And we've done that because our heritage is British cinema. And we want to start creating a new generation of filmmakers that could potentially become the directors of Philomena and The Queen and Dangerous Liaisons and Sammy and Rosie Get Laid and all these amazing films that this gentleman has done. He's been an inspiration to all of us. And so I'd like to welcome Pierce Handling of TIFF and Mr. Stephen Frears.
This is my good ear.
Can you, what?
I'm better that side.
Oh, okay.
This is my good ear.
He's not a director.
You'll need your notes.
Oh, God, no, I won't, because you don't want me to use my notes, Stephen.
Well, these are the people who are interesting.
I know, so we're going to actually... it's funny, I've known Stephen for far too long. Well, actually, not far too long. He's one of I have great affection for Stephen. He's been coming to the festival since, I don't know if you came with a hit, but for sure with Laundrette. So that goes back to the 80s, and we've run almost everything that he's shown, and I have such great admiration for what he's done. And I really sweated this. I went to Wikipedia more than once, and I certainly know the films. You can't hear me? Okay, now can you hear me? Oh, really? Can you hear me now? Is that better? Oh, that's right. Hey, okay. So I have great affection for Stephen. I've known him for many, many years. He was first at the festival with Hit. I'm not sure if he came that year, but for sure he's been here at the festival with Laundrette and virtually everything after that. So I prepared a whole great big thing, So we saw some of the films, which I know very well. And backstage, Stephen said, he wants to get to the audience really, really quickly. So I'm going to throw out a little bit of the script. Because Stephen's a natural anarchist and wants to stir things up, which is always terrific, and resists, I think, easy categorization and resists easy answers, which I love about him. He's as difficult to pin down as the film. No, the films aren't difficult to pin down, but what I've loved about the career is how wide-ranging it is. It actually reminds me of some of the Hollywood directors, and John Ford is one that you have talked about.
Come on.
Yeah, as you know.
People better than Ford.
But those Hollywood craftsmen who were at ease in any genre, and Stephen's worked in so many different genres. So I was going to end with talking about the program. I was going to build up nicely to this kind of semi-chronological, talk about his television career and all that kind of stuff, and get into the feature films, then get into directing and acting, and walk you through those things. But he really wants to talk to you guys. So what I thought we'd do is start with a new film, and there's a trailer, which we'll start with first. So why don't we show you the trailer of the program?
Inside each and every one of us is something more potent, more powerful than any drug. It's called the will to survive.
What does it take for you to race?
I just love to ride my bike.
No longer confined to Earth, now we had learned to fly.
He's a man transformed. He's recovered from cancer and turned into bloody Superman. Why are you so obsessed with this? Why are you not obsessed with this? He wins and he celebrates. He meets the president. He gets more sponsors, more money, more fame. The man is a sheep.
I'm the most tested athlete on the face of the planet. I have never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs.
He is transforming your little Eurosport into a globally significant brand.
If he's cheating in the races, then he's cheating on us as well.
I will not be brought down. We're all on the program.
I didn't sign up for this.
He will attack anyone who steps out of line.
I have the money and the power to destroy you.
I've never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs.
So, Stephen, how difficult?
They make trailers, and you see the trailer, and you think, oh, I see, that's the film I should have made. You think, well, why did I go through all of that, worrying about other things? Oh, I see, all right.
Short films.
No, they make it seem so simple, and it just makes you feel foolish that you lay awake at night.
So how difficult is it to make a film about somebody who's alive and somebody whose story just happened, this part of the story, a large part of it that you focus on, all the dramatic interviews with Oprah about 2, 3 years ago. How difficult it is for you to tackle that kind of subject, a living person?
Well, it's not that the guy is well, I suppose it either does help or doesn't help that he's alive, but cycling is such a peculiar world. So I had to learn about cycling, I had to learn about drugs, and then I had to learn about Lance, and it took a long time just to understand, oh, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And the film is the product of that thought and that degree of research, I suppose.
What fascinated you about him?
A guy who'd ridden with him called Tyler Hamilton wrote a book. He'd ridden with Lance, so he'd ridden in the same teams as Lance, and he'd taken drugs with Lance, so he knew what happened. And he eventually, cycling teams are like pyramids, and Tyler Hamilton got as high, he got to number 2, and then he can't go higher because the object of a cycling team is to get Lance across the line. So he left and joined another team, but of course, he knew what had happened. And in the end, they spilled the beans. And that happened with Lance, and it happened with a man called Floyd Landis, who Jesse Plemons plays in the film. So slowly the truth emerges. I can't remember what your question was.
Why Lance?
It's one of the great, well, it's a terrific crime story, isn't it? I mean, he was a sort of master criminal, amongst other things. He was just such a complicated, interesting man. And the idea of stealing the tour for 7 years, I mean, it's fantastic. What more do you want? It's like it was always seemed to be like a sort of heist movie, that this guy comes in, works out how to do it, or perhaps stumbles on it at first, and then, but also at the same time is raising several $100 million for cancer treatment. So it was full of interesting paradoxes.
deeply conflicted. So tell us about the problems of just structuring this story, Steve. It's got so much, as you said. And
Well,
it took place over so
when you ask me that question, all right, give me about a year to think about it, I'll know what the answer is. It was very, very, it's really to do with what film are you making, and I somehow intuitively, I didn't want to make a biopic. So I can't really answer your question. I know that it took a long time to, I did say I wanted to make a sort of heist film. I knew that. But it took a long time to get to that because people, I mean, first of all, there are always other films being made. There were several films being made about Lance at the same time. And if you're not making the same film as several other people, there's something wrong. So you have to deal with all of that. There was a lot of sort of unspoken pressure to make a biopic, though it never interested me.
But I know you're meticulous in your preparation when it comes to scripts. You really don't go into production before you...
Well, I think I did on this.
You think you would?
I think I did on this.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
So maybe, yeah, talk about that, because I find that really interesting.
Well, I don't develop, you know, most people, through sheer good fortune, I grew up being sent scripts. Do you want to do this? Because if you don't, someone else will do it. So I thought that, I think that scripts are things you're sent. And then you just say, yes, okay, I'll make it, in some rather sort of grand way. And, but most people develop things. And indeed, that's sort of how the industry, a lot of the industry works on, or certainly the classy part of the industry works on. I think it's more sort of auteurist, but I'm famously not an auteur. So in this case, I did read something and said, this sounds incredibly interesting. And if you were to send me a book, I wouldn't know how to develop it. I mean, in other words, if you send me a script, I can more or less say, oh yes, no, I can make a film with this, or I can't make a film with this. But if you send me a book, the more information I have before I read anything, the worse. If you said make a film about your own family, I'd be absolutely, I'd be lost. If you said make a film about, let us say, for want of an example, the Queen or Pakistanis, it's easy because I don't know anything about them. So I have to learn everything. So in that sense, I can imagine I am as ignorant as the audience is, which is what I really prefer.
So you put this film into production before you had the full structure in place? Or the full script?
I think before I knew
what the film was about.
Kind of, yes.
So,
I'm not sure, should I? Perhaps I shouldn't say that publicly. I'm being rather, because we were in a race, I mean, literally it was a race with other people, just as it was on Liaison with Milos Forman on Dangerous Liaisons. And so no one is saying, look, take your time, no hurry. On the contrary, they're saying, can't you get on with it? Also, the train sort of sets off and you're just trying to keep up with it. So yes, I would have been better off waiting a bit, but that wasn't possible. So I had to learn as I went along.
So does that mean whatever you did to it, fixed it or attacked it in the editing room after you'd shot it all?
If you ask the editor, he would say we took out about 45 minutes. So there are other films in there, and this is the film we eventually worked out, but it took a long time. I'm sure I shouldn't be saying any of this. You've been really horrible.
Well, okay. Before we show a clip of then, why don't we talk about a film that ran perfectly, where or they don't run perfectly?
Well, what is it?
No. I'm just asking you. Like one that just was right from the script through to the execution.
Yes. Oh, I see. In general,
it all fell together perfectly for you.
I'm a great admirer of Donald Rumsfeld because he introduced the world to the expression the unknown unknowns. And all you're trying to do in a film is find out what the unknown unknowns are.
The known unknown.
No, the unknown unknowns.
Yes.
What the things you know, halfway through making a film, someone says something and you think, oh, well, I didn't realize it was about that. David Russell said in the last 2 weeks you discover what the film is about. Other people say, oh, I knew from the beginning, but they're very, very clever. So I'm always trying to work out what the film is that I'm making, and it's quite a complicated process. And this was particularly painful.
When do you know you've arrived at that moment then?
I used to say to Tim Bevan, well, how do we know we've got there? Does someone just blow a whistle and say, right, that's it? Because, as you know, because it is so unknown, you think, well, maybe next week I can get it better, and I don't know. It sorts itself out. Or I hope it sort of, you know. And so maybe in 6 months' time I'll think, oh, we should have done this, or we should have done that. In fact, the editor of the program is here, and I said, well, maybe we could change a few things. And he was talking about, Michael Mann used to sit in the projection box, changing the film as it was being projected. So, no, you're quite right. When is it finite? I don't know. It's finite. I've made something else since then.
So when you're on set, let's go back to that. When you're filming a film, how open are you to accident, chance, changing the script? Are you slave to the script? Do things just sort of happen in front of you and you go with that? So you're really open to the moment?
You're both open and you think you know what you're doing, but then people say things, you think, oh my God, I never thought of that. So you're trying to deal with what we might loosely call the rest of the world, really. I mean, other people have to, you just learn the whole time, and it's very, very painful.
So let's show a clip of the press conference from program.
Next question.
David Walsh, Sunday Times.
Mr. Walsh, good to see you here.
Lance, do you feel a responsibility personally to promote a better image for cycling? And if so, how do you reconcile that with your doctor/trainer being so associated with doping?
You're talking about Dr. Ferrari?
I am.
Right. Okay. I'm confident in my relationship with Dr. Ferrari. I believe he's an honest man. I believe he's a fair man. I believe he's an innocent man. You know, people are smart. People will look at the facts. People will say, okay, here's Lance Armstrong. Here's a relationship. Is that questionable? Perhaps. Will they say, Lance Armstrong tested positive? No. Because I have never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. Has Lance Armstrong been tested? Absolutely. I am the most tested athlete on the face of the planet. Is there now a test for EPO? Yes, there is. Will he pass every test because he does not take EPO? Yes, he will. Next question, please.
Ben Foster's amazing, isn't he?
Yeah,
he absolutely. Can you talk about costume?
He was taking EPO in it. Sorry.
All of us. Can you talk about just casting him and then shaping his performance? Or how did that work?
Well, I don't know that I'd take any credit for shaping the performance. I mean, you just respond to what's in front of you, and you're somehow endlessly working out the story and telling the story. I don't know that there was more than, the story began with him being quite innocent, and he became more and more trapped by this lie he was telling. I'd be hesitant to take credit for shaping it. As for casting it, I have a very, very good casting director in London, and she said, the bloke you want is Ben Foster. I met him in New York. He didn't know why he was coming to see me. I said, I'm thinking of making a film about Lance Armstrong. And he jumped on the sofa and went into a pose that Armstrong did in front of his 7 yellow jerseys. It just seemed right. I mean, I've no reason to think I made a mistake.
Did you work with him at all? Did you talk about
Well,
the
most
character,
of the work,
or
the character, he knows, look, he's an American. Of course he knows rather more about the character. You talk about the script, that you're developing the story the whole time. But he went and trained. He had to turn himself into a professional cyclist, which I now realize was very, very complicated. In other words, I was surrounded by professional cyclists, and they look at people and say, oh no, he's believable, and he isn't. So you're trying to pass a sort of credibility test the whole time. So yes, he trained, he dieted. He was with people who'd trained Lance and who'd looked after Lance's physique and things like that. He was indescribably thorough.
and then he just arrived on set and did it?
I think so, yeah. I can't quite remember. Yes, I guess so. I can see there are directors who are interested in the process. You know, I can see that Elia Kazan was interested how James Dean arrived at his performance, or how Brando arrived at his performance. I'm not very good at all of that. I just expect them to turn up on the first day and be very, very good. So, in a sense, they do that privately. I remember when Annette Bening was in, I directed her second biggish film, and I said, well, I remember saying to her, look, there is this woman, this was in The Grifters. I said, there is this woman called Gloria Graham. Who? Gloria Graham. She went away, looked at some Gloria Graham films, and then knew how to play the part. Was that a master stroke of direction? It got her there.
You worked with many great British actors and many great American actors. Maybe you can talk about those differences. Are they different? How they prepare, what they give you?
I once said to John Malkovich, can't you do it any faster? And he said, well, I don't know where to breathe. And I said, didn't they teach you that at drama school? He said, I've never had a day's lesson in my life. So, but if you work with Judi Dench, or indeed Annette, or Helen Mirren, they're very, very skillful people, largely because they come from the theatre. So I guess there are some actors who don't come from the theatre. And you slowly, it all really happened at the beginning of when I started shooting Dangerous Liaisons, which I thought would be this kind of film. And then when I started filming it with, I guess, John Malkovich and Michelle Pfeiffer, I discovered they couldn't do quite what I was expecting. And I thought, well, this is very embarrassing. And then I slowly realized that what they were doing without telling me, that, in other words, they couldn't do this bit, but that bit, they were absolutely fantastic in. And I thought, oh, I see, I think I better change my style of directing from over here, which was like the British theatre, to over there, which was like the American cinema. So you discover what people are good at. That's all. And eventually you realize if you're sensible, you'll use their good qualities rather than asking them to do what they can't do. Doesn't seem to be a crime.
So you've worked with very established actors, and Dustin Hoffman, Annette Bening, etc., John Malkovich. You've also found some extraordinary young talent, Gary Oldman, Daniel Day-Lewis. What was that like to work with them so early in their careers, when they really hadn't shaped themselves into the actors that they became?
Well, they had shaped themselves in truth. I mean, by the time he did My Beautiful Laundrette, Daniel had come across this script. He only had one obstacle to getting the part, and that was me. Once he walked around London saying he was going to kill me if I didn't come. What I mean is that, again, you get credit for things which it's more complicated. In other words, I can see I was sort of the midwife, and I can see that you offer someone like Dan, someone like Gary, someone like Jack Black, a sort of platform in which to do what they're good at. I think that's all I do. And the reason for that is that I can't afford more expensive actors.
Are there any actors who've said that hasn't worked with? where you kind of want them to arrive fully prepared, and they haven't. And there's a sort of, they're looking for more from you in terms of, I should be doing this, or what's my motivation, or can you?
No. Angelica Houston said, we're not going to talk about motivation, are we? I said, I promise you, I'm not going to talk about it. They know they are, they're highly intelligent people, believe it or not. I know they're thought to be sort of idiots, but they're not. They're intelligent people, and they're good at their jobs.
Let's talk about this clip in a little bit more detail. It starts with movement in, which is really dramatic. It's very strong. Then it goes to alternate shots, very static, although there is a kind of a slight move as you reveal the journalist, which is a wonderful kind of moment, a directorial flourish. And then there's a very different moment, which ends it with this camera that swoops in on Ben Lance at the very, very end. So maybe just talk about...
What from the bit we saw?
Yeah. This is all... Like, do you map this out? Is it all on set? Do you do pre-planning? Is it just in the moment?
No, I make it up. Well, I mean, you laugh at that, but actually, if you look at Laundrette, I came out from lunch, and there was a crane on the set. And I said, who ordered that? And they said, you did. And then they, here's the document. Look, Governor, you ordered it. Oh, really? And cranes cost X, so, you're already slightly embarrassed. And then you think, well, I better do something with this bloody bit of machinery. And in fact, we ended up designing a shot that goes from the back of the building over the roof and down to the front, simply because I was so embarrassed. And in fact, I shouldn't be saying any of this. The shot all right, I'll tell you two things that I remember about the press conference scene. There is a shot, there's a crane, I don't know why, but I thought, it should track in, mainly because you got bored doing static shots, and you think, oh God, can't I make it more interesting? So they got a crane, and then we did a shot, and they all kept saying, oh, it's like a rock concert, but, when they go over the heads of the audience. So again, it was thinking, how do I get this to be a bit more interesting? But the really striking thing is, at the end, the camera tilts up from Chris O'Dowd to Jesse Plemons. Mm-hmm. Now, the editor had said to me, isn't there some way in which Jesse, who's playing Floyd Landis, can witness Lance's dishonesty? And I didn't, that's another 3 days shooting and rewriting. And then he turned up in this scene, possibly because I suggested it, or possibly because someone else said, oh, we'll put him in that scene. And then I had the presence of mind to put him standing where he was, and then we did a shot. And then it turned out that the editor had been quite right. So all I did was to listen to somebody being more sensible than I was, and actually beginning to solve a narrative problem that I hadn't been quick enough.
Lots of your
so this is an example of my stupidity, but also by being quick on my feet to, oh, I see, I have to do that. So that's what I was struck by watching it, that I'd got a good editor.
You've talked in your interviews about your role as a director as being like a provocateur, asking questions. But the way you've just described yourself, you haven't really described that part of the process.
Well, one of the things you're doing is you're sort of interrogating the script. When I say, well, Ben had to be believable, you are, whether you like it or not, laying down a sort of, the film has to pass this sort of test. But it's not being said by anybody, it's just in your waters. Or when you say to Annette, look, there's this woman called Gloria Graham, you're actually beginning to describe the film, but it's such an odd way of describing it.
Do you reshoot?
Oh, don't.
You go back after, you realize you've missed something, you have to go back and capture those moments?
On Philomena, I remember going through the script at one point, and I said to the boys, the writers, Steve Coogan and Jeff Pope, at this point in the film, in these kind of films, which in my mind was a sort of screwball comedy, in these sort of films, the plot turns over, literally like that. And then there was another reading, and Judi Dench said it goes soft here. So I guess experience has taught me that, you know, as it were, you listen to your stomach. If you get bored, there's something wrong. And then you think, well, why am I bored? Oh, I see, it should turn over. Now, I didn't actually know what the words meant. They tried to do something. It's really to do with when Judi Dench doesn't go back to London but stays in America. And we tried to find a way in which Steve Coogan's character could persuade her to stay. And as soon as I saw the film, you just thought, well, this is ridiculous, because Judi Dench sat there with a face like thunder, and there was this boy trying to persuade her to stay, and it was completely ridiculous. And that was when I realized that the only person who could persuade her to stay was herself. So we reshot it. Or, you know, a month after we'd finished shooting, we shot another day. And I guess that's an unknown unknown. You just things you discover, and it's all slightly embarrassing after making films for 3,000 years that you still have these bits of these holes in your knowledge. So I hope that the film I've just shot, I hope there won't be any reshooting, but I begin to see little chinks that maybe need, closing up.
Let's go to the next clip from the program, please.
I've never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. Never. I've never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. I've never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. What's that? Thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate that. It's an important question. Perhaps there was a problem in the past. But now, they test for drugs all the time. What we all have to do is fall back in love with cycling. I have never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs.
How many takes, Stephen? Are you sort of a one-take guy? First take is when it all happens, the actor's in the moment, or a scene like this, you have to go through it time and time again?
I can't remember. Well, I mean, there isn't a rule. You just think, oh, that's it, great, or do you want to go again? There isn't a rule. I mean, in that scene, you're conscious of your predecessors. I mean, all you can think about is Taxi Driver, isn't it? Not Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and De Niro looking in the mirror. I did it all. It was all my work. I mean, it's just Ben. It's great in it, isn't it?
So are you are conscious then of other filmmakers, other scenes?
Well, it's not, come on, an idiot would know that De Niro did it in Raging Bull. You don't get marks for that. It's embarrassing. I could have written underneath, sorry, Marty. Oh, no, it's an homage. I'd forgotten. No, it's an homage.
So why don't we open it up to the floor now? I think we've got about another 20 minutes to go. And as you can tell, Stephen's
The truth is, if you're going to pinch from the best.
So who are the best in your mind, then?
Well, Marty's pretty good.
And some of the old masters? I mean, you mentioned Kazan, an actor's director in every sense of the word, came out of
I remember when I was shooting the fight at the end of The Laundrette, I used to watch On the Waterfront. When I got up in the morning, I would watch the fight there, and now I think about it, yes, I pinched it.
Do you show films to your crew at all before you get into a film? Like old films, even for your DOP, just to give a sense?
Yes, so this I've made another film since this, and it's like a pre-war comedy. And I used to tell them to watch, or I'd tell Hugh Grant, who's in the film, to watch Cary Grant films.
Over here.
Hi, I'm interested in your relationship with Hanif Kureish, whom I think is one of the most brilliant writers. And his work is very straightforward, but actually has got lots of complex characters. And you've done 2 of his screenplays, although he's a novelist. So I'm really interested in how you've collaborated with him, from being the person who's written the novels, then the screenplay, and you've worked with him twice. And are you going to collaborate with him again?
Am I going to collaborate with him?
Hanif Kureish.
Are you asking me if I'm going to collaborate, or do you know something I don't know? Psych.
I'm just curious, because I love Hanif Kureish and I love you.
He walked into... I got a phone call, and they said, oh, this boy wants to get a script to you. I said, sure, tell him to put it through the letterbox. He put it through the letterbox, and it was My Beautiful Laundrette. And I said, this is very, very good, we should make it now. And then, by a miracle, it all fell into place. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think it's, I remember reading it. It's just a brilliant script. And then he had to teach me basically about the history of migration into Britain. And I remember saying, well, and it, eventually goes back to ships leaving Karachi and arriving in Britain. And I said, well, should we be making a film like Godfather 2? Or should we be making a silly comedy? We decided to make a silly comedy. It's brilliant. It's harder being, I think he finds it harder at this age. He was a sort of hooligan. Well, he's still a hooligan, but a mature hooligan.
Hi. My question is also related to the same film, My Beautiful Laundrette, as well as Sammy and Rosie Get Laid. And, you represent the other really well, in my opinion. This year we had Deepan, a Jacques Audiard film representing Tamils. And I want to know how you did the casting for these Sammy and Rosie Get Laid and My Beautiful Laundrette, and how were you able to get those characters to be so authentic? Did you work with Hanif Qureshi? Did you work with, how did you manage that?
Well, as you see, I'm a master of Pakistani culture. I know everything about it. There were 2, you describe a world that it wasn't like that. There were 2 possible actors who could play the boy in My Beautiful Laundrette, and I chose the one with the nicest smile. And Saeed Jaffrey was in England, and for some reason I knew about Roshan Seth because he'd been in a play of my friend David Hare's. So there was no choice. That was it. And then when I was in India, I met Shashi Kapoor. I'm innocent, girls. Honestly, you can't. It was that simple, really, and also that, and so there weren't endless possibilities. I'm sure it's all changed in an odd sort of way. Everything has to change at the same moment. The Laundrette changed everything because, apart from the geriatric director, there was a brilliant young writer. There was Tim Bevan waiting to explode. There was Daniel Day-Lewis waiting to explode. And you look back and you think, well, we had a really full house, and they all delivered. But none of us knew that at the time. But if you want to change things, that's what you have to, you walk into a room. Or if you look at, what's the one that Coppola did after Apocalypse Now?
Conversation?
No. They're all in it. Tom Cruise. A whole generation is in one film. What? Whatever it is you're saying, I'm sure you're right. And he just got the lot, didn't he? In one you know, Fred Roos just stood there and said, oh, have him, have him, have him. And they all turned out to, they all became stars. Some days you're lucky.
Next question, way over here. Somebody's got a mic.
Is this on? Yep. Hi, thank you very much. And I just got a quick question regarding, you're very candid with this and very humble, which I appreciate, in mentioning you that you're embarrassed about things. But I have to wonder, since I think Laundrette was probably one of the first gay films I ever saw in Cannes, are there films that you're particularly proud of for breaking through on topics, or any particular moments in your films that you're really proud of?
I'm going to be embarrassed again. I thought My Beautiful Laundrette was about economics. I didn't quite realize that the boys kissing would cause, mainly because I'd been at the Royal Court Theatre where boys kissing was the norm, although I had survived these rough seas. So to me, it was completely unremarkable. And anyone in their right mind would want to kiss Dan. So all that, when it turned out that this is what startled the world, I was rather surprised. So you see how I haven't really a clue. Does that answer your question? Innocence is a great place to work from.
Where's the next mic? Over here?
Hi there. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on using sound and music in your film, like any approach to that, any ideas, how you approach that side of it.
Do I have any thoughts about them?
Yeah. Special thoughts? I don't know.
Hire a good composer. I mean, I don't know a lot about it. And the truth is, I remain ignorant because I do work with very good people. You know, I now work with this incredible Frenchman, Alexandre Desplat, who won the Oscar this year. I remember it was on the Queen, and he came to see me, and an Italian chap who lives in England came to see me. And Alexandre did the music for Jacques Audiard's films, which I really admired. So he came in with an enormous tick against him anyway that was invisible. I remember the producer was very cross. He said, oh, I can't stand French things, but I love Italian things. So anyway, I said, have the Frenchman. He wrote the score in 3 weeks and got nominated, so I'm top of his pops. How good. I don't know enough about. It's actually interesting, the film I'm cutting at the moment. I think I'm concentrating more on that synthesis than I've ever done before. It's interesting.
So it sounds so much like it's so collaborative, the art form. Yes. You're really talking about surrounding yourself with absolutely the best people. At the end of the day.
Well, you hope they're the best. I mean, you don't quite know they're the best people, but you hope. I remember on The Grifters, I wanted, who's the man who did the music for a lot of John Huston's films? Alex North. And I wanted him to do the music, and he wouldn't. And I kept saying to Angelica, go and ask him, why won't he do it? Oh, he wouldn't. And then they gave me a lift, and Elmer Bernstein's name was on it. And I said, blimey, he's fantastic. He did Sweet Smell of Success. So he came to see me. So anyway, we got Elmer. And he was quite a frightening old boy, Elmer. Within 10 minutes, he told me how he did the music for 10 Commandments. And, you know, anything to make me feel comfortable. But I remember talking to him about Sweet Smell of Success. And he wasn't quite sure what I was talking about. But then a few weeks later, he said, oh, I ran it. It's really good, isn't it? And I said, did you know Alexander McKendrick, who made it? He said, oh, I think I met him at the premiere. So it isn't quite the way everyone thinks it is, that, you know, people were sort of sweating over it at night. It was just, it was that, you know, I guess Burt Lancaster or whoever produced the film, they hired Elmer to do it, and it was really nothing to do with McKendrick. So from that, I discovered that the whole thing was much more collaborative, or it was more subtly collaborative than anybody realized. I have good people, and they seldom let me, I have no sense of being let down. There's a wonderful story of Simon Callow made a film about Charles Laughton, and Charles Laughton directed Night of the Hunter. And he interviewed Robert Mitchum, and he said to Robert Mitchum, well, what did Charles Laughton say to you? And Mitchum said, well, he didn't say anything. And Simon Callow said, well, he must have said something. And Mitchum said, well, he said, today we're doing page 38. You describe it all in sort of rather mystical terms, which I don't know how to answer you. You're there with a group with a lot of people, some of whom you know, some of you don't know. You kind of have to get on with them, don't you? It's much, the truth is, it's all much more human. And sometimes, I remember when Glenn Close arrived in Paris, we were all rather nervous. Mainly because Christopher Hampton went around saying the eagle has landed. And you just thought, my God, this woman, and she'd just done Fatal Attraction, and you just thought, my God, this woman is smart. I better be, on my toes. And I've just worked with Meryl Streep, and they're very, very bright women. You know, they carry heavy handbags. I don't know, you just have to deal with other people, don't you? But I can't tell you what the formula is. I used to say to John, on Liaison, I would point at Peter Capaldi and I'd say to John Malkovich, why can't you act as well as him?
We've got a mic.
Do you want other stories of how unpleasant I am?
Yeah, on that note, I'm just curious what inspires your work.
What inspires my work?
Yes. I'm sort of the essence of that inspiration, regardless of what great films you've made.
There's a wonderful clip on YouTube of John Ford, who clearly I admire enormously, saying, film director, he says, it's as easy as pie. It's a very, very good way to earn a living. A more provocative line you can't imagine. I don't know, you've got to do something in your life, haven't you? I mean, it's very, very hard. What I mean is, it's hard to answer your question. I find hello, somebody's being rung up. I find the more problems become technical, the more interesting it becomes, oddly enough. I don't mean technical in the sense of digitally technical. Oh, look, how do we get him out of the room, interestingly? You know, if you'd said to Billy Wilder, why was Lubitsch so good? He would have said, because he would invent a better way of getting someone out of someone's bedroom than anybody else. It was to do with his inventiveness. And actually when Ford was making two-reelers, he'd say he'd said, oh, we invented a really good way to rob a bank. So they're not talking about the aesthetics of the cinema, they're talking about what it is you're filming, which I guess is a good place to start. So for some reason, I'm allowed to make films about what interests me. Don't ask me why I'm interested in them. I don't have to think that. I read something and like it. I'm sorry to be so evasive.
Next question. Mike's over here.
I was wondering if you would tell me some of your favorite things about directing.
About what?
About directing.
About directing? It's bloody hard work. It's got worse. I mean, it's got harder. Well, now I think about it, it has very little to recommend it. I have no idea. I mean, it does seem to me it suits a kind of spoiled person. I mean, I'm much more aware of the spoiled brat theory than the auteur theory. I'm allowed to invent a world of the film, and I'm allowed to invent the world in which it's made. So all these people around me are like a surrogate family. So I guess it's making up for inadequacies in other parts of my life. Or maybe it's what Wells says about, well, it's the biggest toy train in the world. It's what I do, so I don't really think a lot about it.
I think we're going to have,
Yeah.
I told you this would be the best bit.
On High Fidelity, there are a lot of writers who were involved in the adaptation. Were you part of the writing process, or did you get the script when it was finished?
Of what?
High Fidelity.
High Fidelity.
John Cusack rang me up. He said, would you be interested in making a film of High Fidelity? It's set in Chicago. And I thought, oh, well, that's pretty stupid, isn't it? I'd read the book. And then I had the grace to read the script and realize I was being particularly obtuse. And I realized that they had actually unlocked the book in some the book is largely interior monologues, and they'd found a way to dramatize those. So I was very, very impressed that they'd got that far. And then John had written it with D.V. Vincentis and Steve Pink. They all grew up in Chicago, so they were putting a lot of their own lives in, just as Nick Hornby, I guess, had put a lot of North London in. So there was quite a lot of rich material.
That's it.
I think it was me who said, I think it was voiceover when I read it, and I said, I think it should be direct address. So clearly the whole thing was down to me.
Do you have time for one more? What do you think? One more? Yeah, okay, one more.
Have we overrun?
I got to run to a screening, actually.
Well, no, I can do it with them.
Do you want to stay? Yeah. I think there's another session, but who cares?
Oh, I see. Somebody more interested. Right.
Well, you have a marvelous sensibility, and I
It's called being English.
all of your films. But this is actually a technical question on your process that you could actually answer, is how involved are you in the cutting and the editing of your films?
I work with a very, very good editor. So I go into the cutting room and I fall asleep on a sofa. And periodically I wake up and think, oh, that's very good. He's very, very clever. Listen, the truth is I'm 100% involved. In the end, it has to have my blessing. I think he's very, very clever. So I've, as you see, learned to keep my mouth shut. So everything is filtered through a sort of conversation between us. Does that answer your question? So he does everything, but everything on the film I've sort of given my blessing to, but do I do it myself? No.
So a wonderful masterclass in demystification. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.